All right. So if you're here for the Fight Tech with Tech, this is Palo Alto Networks vendor demo. We're going to talk about XIM today and our autonomous SOC platform. Before we get going, talk about who I am. My name is Mark Weber. I'm a systems engineer here at Palo Alto Networks. I've been in IT for 30 years. I was doing the math on that last night. That was a little bit hard to come to that number and write that down. Been doing this since I was 19, so that it kind of gives you an idea. But some highlights from my career: I spent 13 years in identity and access management at UW-Madison. The first half really doing identity, so that was a lot of data warehousing and working with data, munging data, working with identities, and then getting into Radius and SAML and authentication on the access side of that. I then took that and spun that into a career here at PDS. If you guys are familiar, that company here in Brookfield. I feel like everybody at one point has gone through PDS. Dave worked at PDS. Andrew Drix worked at PDS. Everybody's been here. Josh Yost, which is actually how I ended up. In fact, when Dave Wilkie went to Varonis, the reason that I ended up at Palo Alto was because he just accepted a position at Varonis. So been here 7 years. I started in the what at that time was just called the namespace, and then moved to Cortex Majors. It is split several times. We've got commercial, SMB, enterprise now, but just recently came back in January to commercial space. So gave you some reasons to trust me. I figured I'd throw these things out here. Reasons probably not to trust me. I'm a Vim user. That doesn't mean anything to you. That's good. Maybe the text editor wars are over. Greedo deserved it, as far as I'm concerned. If you don't know what I'm talking about there, Deep Space Nine, that is the best Star Trek series. Facts, okay, so that's not opinion. If you're walking out, I'll assume you're an Emacs guy or you like the original series. No. Today, I do want to talk about, we're framing this up as like a SOC conversation, but really just talking about security operations in general, because I know that a lot of people, as we look at SOC, it's kind of an emerging space, and it suffers from all the same problems across the board. We have siloed tools. We're built up. We have a business problem. We have a technical problem with our tools, the way that we sell them, the way that we address them. I was looking at this picture, and we see all of these acronyms: EDR, NTA, TIP, and I thought, boy, this seems like it's overwhelming. But if you look at each and every one of these inside of every organization, there was a conversation. There was a conversation with a vendor, maybe multiple vendors. There was requirements that were gathered. There was POVs perhaps done, POCs. Worked with legal, we got contracts, we purchased, we went through professional services, we implemented for each and every single one of those, and that is a fraction of the quote acronyms that we have to deal with in the SOC, right? As the blue team, if we call it that. And what ends up happening is that we have weak defense. We're not very good at taking our threat defense and operationalizing that and turning that into useful forward momentum on incident response, on threat hunting, on any of those categories, and a large part of that is the way that we organize those teams. Our methodology around that it doesn't serve us well, and a lot of that's it being new, right? Every team that I see, I spent some time in the majors. Large companies may have SOCs. They may have a SOC or a security operations center that has 10 people, 15, 20 people in it, but in reality, most small, medium-sized businesses might take somebody from the network team, somebody from the endpoint team, put it together, and they're just getting started down this road, or maybe they're a couple years into this. And still so much of it is not very prescriptive from the industry itself. We as vendors, put out a boatload of these point products that's very difficult. They aren't integrated. That is your responsibility to do that integration. And it's a very confusing space to try to come in because it's so rapidly evolving. Where do you put your foot in? Where do you step down first? What is the right thing to tackle first? And a lot of people started with a data warehousing problem. We looked at it like, hey, we're generating all these logs. Makes sense. Let's aggregate them together so we can do interesting, useful things with them. So the SIM world, 10, 15, 20 years ago started off as really data warehousing. And I can tell you from my time in working in identity that I brought up earlier, we ran into this same problem when we were looking at doing authentications, authorizations, we needed much more of what we call an operational data store. We care about currency of the data, not necessarily, the data warehousing is about the legacy of the data, how long it's there, what historically that information looked like. When we're making authorization or authentication decisions, we need current data. We only need it for relatively short periods of time, and then it's gone. So it's really a different use case. And when we try to graft on a data warehouse problem onto an operational data store, you run into problems. And this is sort of the space that we've lived in. And so the SOC has been forced to do all sorts of interesting things to, it's all manual. It's munging data. It's using Python and scripting and building stories about what happened on our network or what happened inside of this environment. And the reality is there's too many alerts being generated for us to capture them all. This is done through survey. We see that 11,000 alerts a day on average, and 23% of those aren't getting looked at. I think that's conservative. I think that's like when somebody gets pulled over and the cop says, how many beers have you had? 2. I think everybody feels that 23% is the safe number to say that we don't investigate. I mean, we've seen this. We know this, that's not the case. It's a difficult, challenging problem, and a lot of it has to do with our methodology, right? Our tools aren't conformant to what we need them to do in order to surface the correct information. It's also, the SOC has suffered from a lack of innovation in this space. Part of that is because it's new. But when we think about like networking or virtualization, the consolidation that's happened as a part of that, or moving to the cloud, those are all evolutions that have happened in compute throughout those years and made it better, faster, more secure as a byproduct of that. The SOC has really never endured anything like that. There hasn't been a revolution that has happened that's been a SOC tool. When you think about a lot of the tools that the SOC gets, they're inherited. The endpoint was a decision that was made based on its management probably, or its configurability, maybe on its feature set, but I don't think security was always at the top of that, or may not have been at the top of that. Likewise with your network infrastructure. Does the SOC have a say in this? And what we're finding is because the SOC is ineffective, and that has real measurable impact on the organization, we need to start looking at it from through the other way. We need to put the SOC in charge of their tool set to do the things they need to do their job effectively. Because let's face it, we're spending millions of dollars on tools, and the outcomes aren't great. We're still getting breached. What we end up with is this, a prototype. It looks messy, but if you're ever going to prototype hardware, you're going to use breadboard. Something like this, not modern day hardware, ASICs or other things you're going to build, won't resort to this. But if you're a hobbyist nowadays, this is the way that you would build, a small computer or a small feature board that you wanted to then integrate, and then you could send it to a PCB manufacturer that would print that board for you. You would never roll into production with this, but in reality, this is what most SOCs have. Right? They get tools, they bring in their telemetry, their logs, any way that they can. And they bring them together to try to do their investigations as best they can, to put stories together as part of that. It's still a very difficult and challenging problem. Because it's a data problem, this is where we started. We started with our SOC. We identified several key partners that were going to help us build this, but it starts here. How do we bring all of this telemetry together? When we came out with XDR, for instance, back in 2018, we were one of the first vendors we were the first vendor to come out with XDR. We coined the term. But the idea there was really just that it is no longer enough to look at a single source of telemetry, to look at just your firewall logs, or to just look at your endpoint logs. You have got to find a way to bring those together, to add context to that, to understand this. This was the idea behind a layer 7 firewall, right? We can bring user information, we can bring context to our network logs. This is an expansion of that. This is pushing this further, right? Bring endpoint together with network, together with identity, with any cloud or tertiary quaternary data sources by which we can add context to the story and then build it for the analyst. Because this is the goal of every SOC, is to build that story to understand what's happened. Like I said, this was an operational data store, or a data warehousing problem is in the way that this started off. I built something similar to this in the way that we stitch data together, but really just in that identity space. And that was bringing together 3 authoritative data sources: student data information system, an employee data information system. I said I worked for UW-Madison. All colleges have an interesting scenario where their customers are commingled with their employees. They all work in the same place. The employees and the customers, they live in the same databases. Oftentimes our customers are our employees, and our employees can be our customers. So identity is an interesting thing, and who's responsible for that? Where's HR, where's student? Bridging those together and identifying the flesh and blood people so we can make authentication and authorization decisions was an extremely difficult challenge. It took us about a decade to do that right. So you can see that this was a huge problem in the industry then to take something like that just in the identity space and grow that out to the entire platform and be able to essentially pour any log from any vendor into a data store and do interesting things with it. Analytics, machine learning, and have context and understand what that means. So this was the kind of the first puzzle piece that we needed to get. XIM is the byproduct that came out of that. We worked with our SOC to revolutionize our SOC. We use similar tools. We used SIM in the past. We had a SIM called Devo. We used Splunk prior to that. And our SOC went through similar challenges. But XIM is the output of some design partners as well as our own SOC going through this transformation and saying, what would happen if we put the SOC first? If we put cybersecurity first and let the SOC decide their tools and the things that they need for the first time. And that's what we built. So the idea was, how do we bring all of this data together? And really the promise of a SIM, right? The data warehousing, it seems like it would make sense. We aggregate all the data. We do interesting things with them. But operationally, that has never borne out in the SIM space, really, to drive incident response. Most people today own a SIM in large companies. They might have a Splunk implementation. They spend millions of dollars a year on it. They have 10, 15 people tend to it, and that's what it requires. Not everybody can do that, so that becomes quite a challenge to do that at a smaller scale. And that is where I think the power of all of this comes. This is time for the next innovation to really come about. To go from this idea of a prototyping breadboard where we have a sort of a burgeoning industry here to really formalize it and turn it into something that's an integrated circuit. In that same capacity, that same mindset. All of these tools that we're using, all those different acronyms can be pre-integrated and sold as a single tool. And so the proof is really in the pudding. Does it work? So once we did that, this is on average, we have several customers that use this. Most of the design partners, I think 90% of the design partners that went through this ended up buying this, implementing, and use this. Some interesting things about this. So once we integrate XIM, of course, telemetry is the big thing. How much data can we collect? Because that's what is important. And not only what data do we collect, what do we do with that? How can we make that useful? So how do we understand that in relation to one another? And you can see here, for this particular customer, this is per day. So 230 gigs per day going into their former SIM. They were generating 290-ish incidents out of that, where most of them were either manual or minimally done through automation. And again, about 20% of these weren't being investigated. When you look at moving to XIM, we're tripling, quadrupling the amount of data that we're ingesting, but we're also, a third or a quarter of the amount of incidents that are generated, because we're also grouping all of those alerts into incidents. We're building out most of that story where we can. We're automating away response to given alerts so that what's presented to the analyst is the story that's already created. We don't have to have individual expertise that relies on how good is our SOC engineer. We can start to commoditize that space a little bit, become more consistent in how we deliver that. So how do we do that? Let me jump out here and I'll show you what it looks like. Just a time check, about 10 minutes left. So this is XIM. We have obviously improved the interface quite a bit from, if you've ever seen our XDR or any sort of endpoint tool, you can see here kind of the principle of what we do in a nutshell. So data sources on the left. We can click into these. Of course, our firewall data, very common. We have our endpoint data. We can drill into these as part of this and get a breakdown of our different operating systems. How much data are we ingesting, right? 53 terabytes today from our endpoint space, our firewalls. This is just our data inventory. This is of all the sources that we're pulling in. Azure, Office 365. These are pre-built integrations that have pre-built data models that you literally just enter in some API keys and we start consuming that data and doing interesting things with. Now, how do we do that? We do that through a marketplace. If you've not seen the marketplace, we acquired a company 5 or 6 years ago called Demisto, and they were adamantly product agnostic. And I remember when we first met some of the Demisto folks, they were very keen to sort of assert that they were going to maintain their vendor independence. They wanted to be an open source or an open platform for all vendors, and we've kept that. We've I think not Palo Alto-atized that product, and we kept all of those integrations. So when you see our data models in here, you can come in and look for these content packs or how you improve or add functionality to XIM. So you just simply come in here and we'll download a content pack. But if I want to look for maybe some specific features, I'm going to look for these data models. Content packs that have data models, because the data models are going to be where we can plug those in and immediately start doing analytics against those data sources. And in here you can see we've got Fortinet guys right outside the door. We can ingest FortiGate, Checkpoint, Cisco, Cisco AMP, endpoint space, DNS, DHCP. All of those can add context to this, and it's a point and click, minimal configuration. And these content packs are built to already, deliver that information into the system. We assemble them into incidents, right? So no more, 1 second here. The curse of the live demo. There we go. So here's an incident. We can see we have quite a few things going on here. Pretty busy screen, but presents great amount of information really just starting here at the top. We can see 36 other alerts from multiple different sources. We have a summary here of malware has been executed inside of our environment. We can see we have some automations, some playbooks that have already run inside of this incident to start to address some of these. See a large upload over FTP. We'll take a look at what happens as part of an automated playbook with that. But we have all of our alerts, all of our alert sources, and we can break into them and, of course, drill down and get directly to the alerts. We also map this into the MITRE framework, and this includes not just high, medium, critical, but also informational, low. Those add context. We keep all of those. Those are very important. Other vendors don't always see that as the most important thing, but most of the stuff that, when somebody's living off the land inside of your network are going to be low and informational. They're that way on purpose. So if you're going to try to find those and suss those out, you're going to have to track those. We, of course, keep all of the alerts together as inside of just an alert table, as most people are used to in their SIM. They want to just look at tabular data. That's fine. That's another way to do those investigations. But we can also look at the entire execution chain, right? The entire causality group from initiating event all the way through to what happened as part of that. So here we can see, maybe, I'm not sure how well y'all can see that. But we can see that the sequence of events here starts with Chrome, goes to 7-zip, opens a command interpreter, opens PowerShell. We see this sequence of events. We can chain this, thread this all together. Again, from multiple different sources across. We can see the firewall entry and exit points where this happens. We can see command injections. We can see where analytics have fire. We can see where the behavioral pieces of this all come inside of this execution thread. So again, laying out that visually for the analyst to understand what were the sequence of events happened, who are the users that were in play, what were the different assets that were involved. And that's key. That's hugely part of it. But we talked a little bit about this automation. So I'm just going to look at this critical alert here that we got, which was our Fortinet firewall had said we've uploaded a lot of information, 2.86 gig from this source to this destination. It's also something that doesn't happen very often, so it flags it. And here we have standard incident that we would expect to see as part of this, general case information. We have all of the command tasks as part of the playbook that has run. Inside of our war room, a step-by-step, complete sequence of events of everything that's happened inside of this case, every bit of communication that's gone on between analysts. Everything is fully sequenced. every bit of enrichment that's been done on indicators of compromise, so every IP address that we've sent to VirusTotal to get a reputation on, logged and sequenced in here. So we absolutely capture and document every single thing that happens inside of a case. Playbooks, visual playbooks, here we can see exactly how powerful this is with that type of an alert. We see this upload. What do we want to do? We have some questions. We check it against VirusTotal. We get the IP info. We ask the user. We send them a piece of information. We say, hey, did you mean to upload this? Did you do this? We got an answer back from them. As no, that can be done via email. So this can be done out of band. Again, before the user has even, or the analyst has even looked at this incident, this playbook is already fired, sent an email to the user, collected a response, and brought that back. We checked it against VirusTotal to see if it was malicious. We determined that it was. We added it to an indicator of compromise for the Fortinet. We added it to XIM, and we added it to Panorama to push out to all of our firewalls. So we've immediately adapted our entire perimeter for this without any action or intervention on the user's behalf. Now again, these automations they're not forced on you. You obviously have to turn them on, you have to configure them, you have to want to do these things. That is one of the grow into types of things that, with all automation, right? Nobody starts off day one and uses automation to, drop the entire user database from UW-Madison accidentally. I'm kidding. This is XIM, and so that hopefully paints a little bit of a picture about the future of where we're headed, the way that we see the world. It has to absolutely be about collecting all of this telemetry, consolidating it, understanding it, being able to see a live feed, what's happening inside of your SOC as the incidents come in, as the alerts come in. This is obviously a very busy SOC. This is a little bit what our SOC looks like on a daily basis. Alerts raining down from multiple different sources and being able to track that in real time and respond automatically to it. That's the autonomous SOC that Nir Zook had talked about. It doesn't replace human beings. It replaces the equation where the human being that is now in charge of manually munging all of this data together, creating those stories, doing the incident response, doing the threat hunting, is now flipped on its ear. We put automation in control of that that's guided by humans. We only bring the humans in when we need a human to understand context that the computer can't. More telemetry, the more the computers, the robots can understand what's happening. So this is XIM from Palo Alto Networks. We think this is the future of the SOC, and that is my time. So, thanks everybody.